All right, all right. Welcome back to another episode of the Passion in Motion podcast. I am your host, Mutsa, and today I'm joined by another very special guest, Bobbie Greene, one of my fond friends from, just from the professional world and stuff. So, welcome, Bobbie. Please say hello to our wonderful people out there.
Thank you, Mutsa, and hi, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here.
Awesome. I'm excited for today. Just to kind of get into conversations and learn more about you, the work you've done, and yeah, where you are today and things like that. So, first things first. When you were starting your career, Bobby, like, what was the one thing you wanted to be when you grew up? Like, what were you thinking to yourself? Like, I really want to do this, and then we can kind of get into your professional journey. So, I'm kind of curious what that was.
Yeah, this is going to be a doozy, Mutsa. My dream when I first got started with my career, I would say at university, I wanted to be Christiane Amanpour. I wanted to be a journalist who traveled the world and reported on what was happening and what people needed to know about social issues,
Mm.
international conflict. I wanted to be that person. Things went very different.
Did you study journalism? Well, like when you were in college?
I did, yeah. My undergrad
Okay.
degree is actually in English writing and journalism.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So yeah, so how did this how did you start from there to where you are now? I'm kind of curious how the journey flows.
Yeah. Well, you know, our parents can have a pretty strong determining factor when it comes to what we decide we're going to do with our lives, and
Yeah.
that was no different for me. My father was actually adamant that journalism was on the way out. No one was going
Mm.
to be reading newspapers any longer, and I needed to think about something more practical, like being a teacher. Well, I decided, okay, I hear what you're saying, but because you told me to be a teacher, I'm definitely not going to be a teacher.
I love that.
I'm happy to be practical, but I still want to be independent.
Yeah.
So I went to graduate school because I still didn't know what I wanted to do. I minored in political science. I knew there was
Mm.
something out there in the world that was going to be interesting to me. I just hadn't found it yet. So I got involved with nonprofits, I got involved with volunteer work. I went to graduate school, became a graduate assistant. And one of my mentors there said, you know what, when you are teaching class, it is clear that you are so interested in the topic, but also you really want to help people understand.
Mm.
You also have incredible command of the classroom. I really think you should think about being a teacher.
Mm.
And of course, I scoffed at the idea. No way was I going to be a teacher. And
Yeah.
then he said something that completely changed my mind. He said, be a teacher for as many years as it takes to get your leadership degree, and then you can become a principal. And I thought,
Mm.
I could become a school principal. I could be the one in charge. And
Yeah.
Mutsa, that totally spoke to me. I could be the one in charge.
Awesome.
Never in my life had I even dreamed I could be in a position like that. As a Latina, as a woman, there were so many factors riding against me. But
Mm.
here was an opportunity. I could become a school principal. So I became a teacher after years of saying, no way, not me.
Yeah.
And something incredible happened. I got to the classroom and I was told 2 days before my students arrived
Hmm.
that the school had made a grave mistake. These were the words they used. We have made a
Mm.
grave mistake. We were supposed to hire an English language learner teacher, not an English language arts teacher. So they
Okay.
gave me the option. I could either decline the position so they could find someone who could fill that role, or I could agree to learn on the job and earn the credentials to become an English language learner teacher.
What are the differences between the two? Like, they sound kind of similar, but I'm like, okay, maybe, yeah. I just want to make sure, like, even people who might be curious, like,
Yeah,
what's the major difference
it's
here?
vastly different, Mutsa.
Okay. Oh,
English language arts is teaching writing, literature,
okay.
speaking skills, everything that you think of when you think, I'm studying reading, writing in school. These are English language arts teachers.
Hmm.
But they needed an English language learner teacher, which is someone who teaches English language
Hmm.
to learners who are coming sometimes with 0% English in their experience. So this was the choice I had.
Wow. Was there like a difference in grade? Like, what grade level? Well, like, was it like what ages were we talking about here for these kids?
Well, here's the thing. As an English language arts teacher, you could teach, the curriculum was vastly different per
Okay.
grade level.
Hmm.
Ninth grade was kind of a survey course of all different types of literature. 10th grade was world lit, 11th grade American lit, and seniors, this was another survey course of a higher level. But when you teach English language, you teach very beginner level all the way to quite advanced. And
Hmm.
sometimes they're separated by class period.
Hmm.
Sometimes they're all in the same class period together. So you have to differentiate per student
Ah,
within the same class.
wow.
I didn't know all that the day that they gave me this choice, Mutsa, but I chose to stay.
That's awesome.
Mostly because I needed a job, but also, again, because I wasn't afraid of the challenge. I thought, this has happened to me for a reason.
Hmm.
Let's see where this goes.
Yeah.
I wanted to do my best for my students, but I also wanted to honor myself in stretching beyond what I already knew. And I never became a school principal. I loved being a teacher.
Wow. So I know you're saying that you're gonna try to do both in tandem, right? Be a school teacher and then do leadership courses. So did you just like decide not to do the courses, or were
I
you still
decided
doing them
not
and
to.
then you decided not to?
Yeah,
Okay.
I decided not to. I struggled those first couple of years as a teacher because I came in with zero teaching experience. But I had some wonderful mentors and I had a lot of great ideas that I realized later came from listening to the kids.
Hmm.
As public school teachers, we are required to teach a certain curriculum within a certain period of time and
Yeah.
hit certain milestones. This can be difficult when you hold every student to the same standard without recognition of what their individual circumstance is. So, I worked really hard. I worked late hours. I gained 60 pounds from the stress and the constant just eating snacks because I was always working. But I realized I had become, within those first few years, the teacher who these kids needed. And I stayed.
Hmm.
I stayed for 12 years
Wow.
because I loved them. I
Yeah.
loved being someone who could support them in their learning journey. And I saw the people they became. And it was wonderful. I never wanted to leave it.
Yeah. Yeah, that must have been powerful. I mean, teachers, I feel like, have the rare experience of seeing the fruit of your labor to some extent. Like actually get to see like results, sort of, right, especially in your like what you were doing. Like from someone who could not speak any English at all. You spend a couple of years with them, and they are like semi-fluent or actually became fluent. Or I mean, that must be like a whole new, I'm sure the tough days you had, there were some days you're like, wow, I don't think I can do this anymore. Then maybe you would meet some kid who'd be like, if it wasn't for you, I would not have made it to this stage of
Yeah.
my life, or I would not have. And I'm sure that's probably what keeps a lot of teachers going, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
Wow.
Every day it was a, a balance of like, oh, how many more years can I do this?
Yeah.
With like, oh, this is exactly why I do this.
So I mean, you did this for 12 years, and then we can kind of move on from this. But I'm just curious, like, at which point in those 12 years did you feel like, okay, now I have a good handle on this?
Yeah, in my last few years, actually, I had decided to focus less on the traditional teaching methods. I'd become really interested in project based learning. And I volunteered to become one of the lead teachers to pilot our STEM program in the high
Mm,
school where I taught. With my involvement, it effectively became a STEAM program because I was sure to integrate language arts and public speaking, those types of things.
yeah.
But it was a wonderful collaborative effort between myself and several other teachers to stand up this academy at the high school where I taught. And part of the reason I got involved was because I had stopped learning. And I realized at that point in my life that while teaching gave me the opportunity to reinvent what I was doing from class period to class period, from year to year, I never taught the same thing the same way twice.
Mm,
I
okay.
had stopped learning new techniques, new strategies. And while that's available to teachers, it just wasn't exciting to me anymore. And I started to feel that slump of, I don't know if this is where I'm supposed to be any longer because I have
Mm.
stopped growing. And that is very important to me. I am a lifelong learner.
No, I love that. Okay. No, that's really good, because I was gonna say like, oh, and then just maybe final question, and then you can talk about your experience after that. What are like two major things that you learned about yourself during those 12 years? Like, what did you say? Wow, I did not know this about myself, or I don't know, like an area where you're like, wow, this impacted me in this way.
I would say number one, I had a lot more patience than I ever thought possible.
Mm,
I grew up not having very good models of what patience looked and felt like, or even sounded like.
hmm,
And I always thought, I am not a patient person.
mm,
But in my experience with my students, I learned I was much more patient than I thought I was. And in fact, it was one of the gifts that I could give to my students is to just be patient, allow time, allow space, allow them to figure it out at their own pace, always nurturing. Another thing I learned about myself was, in fact, that I am a lifelong learner. Prior to being a teacher, I thought I just needed to learn to advance. That was the
hmm.
goal.
Yeah.
But because I had summers off, and teachers are only paid for 10 months of work out of the year, but I did
Mm,
have my summers off. So I would set aside money to make sure that I had enough for gas money so that I could volunteer at different organizations around the Atlanta area. We had International Rescue Committee, Refugee Resources that I was very heavily involved in, Habitat for Humanity, but also that I could learn something new. So I did things like horseback riding.
wow.
I learned how to ride and jump horses. Different things like that that just kept challenging me to do something new, learn something new, and keep growing as a person.
I love that. No, that's beautiful. Wow. Okay. So now your teaching job, you're like, okay, I'm good with this. Time to move on. What was that next step? Like, what did you step into after that?
Yeah, that next step was a tough one because I knew I was leaving the classroom and I probably wouldn't come back. But I moved into international travel, international service, and also became a USAID Foreign Service trailing spouse. So that meant that I was going to put those skills of learning and adapting, trying new things, I was really going to put those to use as a trailing spouse because there was no career that I was going to just be able to fall into. There was no guarantee that a position would be available to me
Mm,
based on what my current skills or knowledge was. As a trailing spouse, you really are what? You have to get what you get and don't pitch a fit, as my son used to say.
wow.
There are always, there are always different options depending on what post we arrived at. Sometimes there were teaching positions, sometimes not.
Hmm.
So I just had to be adaptable and creative. And that next phase really taught me a lot about myself.
Wow. Yeah, I know that can be difficult. Yeah. Okay. So how long was that? Like, were you moving around and then just how long was that process, or like how long did that take before you were like settled back down?
Yeah, so the way it works with USAID was that we would move every 2 to 4 years.
Mm,
Some families had been in it a lot longer than we were. But from Atlanta, I went to Liberia in West Africa and had a couple of amazing opportunities there with both USAID and the US State Department.
mm.
I met a lot of wonderful local folks that really taught me the true meaning of hospitality. And from there, we were posted in Amman, Jordan. So again, very distinct shift.
Yeah.
But I had a wonderful opportunity to work there with the US State Department again. And, the entire time learning about people and cultures and all of that. And something I like to say is for 12 years, I had the world coming to me in my
Yeah.
classroom, students from all over the world coming to, the suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia, and somehow finding their way to my classroom. And then it became my turn to get out into the world, to these places where my students had come from, and really explore and remember them as I was traveling the world.
Yeah, I'm sure that was also like an interesting experience for you in the sense that, as you're saying, when you were a teacher, you were teaching these kids English, right? And like they didn't know anything. They're in this new environment, and you're kind of like their guide, I would say. And now you're in an environment where you are now the person who needs to kind of like learn what's around you, right? And it's
Yeah.
like I'm sure that was also like kind of interesting. Before that, like when you were moving, were you interested in like traveling like the world at all in general,
Oh,
or was that like
absolutely.
okay?
Absolutely. I'll remind you, I wanted to be Christiane Amanpour when I was
Yeah.
fresh out of high school. And travel was something that I had dreamed about my entire life. As a literature an English major, I read about the world through books and I
Hmm.
traveled the world through my imagination. As a girl, my favorite movies were Indiana Jones. I mean, going to all of these places, learning about all of these cultures, being really embedded in these places. So when I finally got to do it for myself, in a real way and spend some real time in these places, get to know the people, learn the languages. I learned Arabic when I was in Jordan. Eat the
Ooh.
food, oh, the amazing food all over the world. It was just it's been a phenomenal experience.
So you did, in some ways, get to live your dream, right? Like
Yeah,
that sounds in some way you did, right? Like if that was part of that, oh, I want to be this person so I can do these things. I mean, that
yeah.
kind of played itself out in that way. That's really cool. Okay, nice. No, that's very nice. Yeah. What were some of like the things you're not expecting? Like let's say culture shocks when you're moving to these different places, because again, from Liberia to Amman, those are two different
Yeah.
places. Those are two different like, or from the US to to Liberia, from Liberia to Georgia. What was something that you were like, well, I'm completely I did not know about this.
This is a tough one, Mutsa. I think the thing that shocked me the most was how at home I felt. Um, in
Mm,
Liberia, the first thing I noticed as a gardener, as one of my hobbies, the first thing I noticed was that I recognized all of the plants in Liberia.
mm,
And my family grew up um, in Florida along the Gulf Coast. And my parents actually retired back to the town where they met as children and grew up
mm.
together. And all of the same plants that are in my parents' garden were there in Liberia. And I thought,
Oh,
I know this place. Like,
what kind of plants are we talking about here?
they had, all these tropical plants, hibiscus and Thai
Mm,
plants. I think they're called pepper plants, uh, oleanders, things that I had grown up seeing and were
yeah,
very familiar to me and
yeah.
in some ways symbolized home.
Hmm.
So automatically the context I was in felt familiar, felt like home. And I think that lowered potential barriers that could have been there for me, any anxieties I must have had, or worries about, learning a new place. That was one less thing that was on my mind.
Yeah,
And as I got to know the people, like I said, I really learned true hospitality. I mean, I could be on a plane leaving Liberia to go back to the States to see family. And I would be sitting next to someone on the plane who would share their story with me. We shared snacks together. They would give me their number, their email. Oh, come, I live in Sierra Leone. You have to come visit. You can
yeah.
stay in my hotel. I still remember that person to this day. I never got over to Sierra Leone, but just beautiful hospitality and warm welcoming. And I found the same to be true in Jordan. We were always welcomed into people's spaces, always, of course, shared tea or coffee with. There's just a warm atmosphere of connection.
Mm,
And as I have learned more over the past decade about culture and connections and the difference between U.S. culture and cultures elsewhere in the world, what I was experiencing was this very like people forward culture, this culture of connection making. Whereas in the
yeah,
U.S., whether we're at work or we're out getting things done, it's all very like focused on the thing that needs to get done, right?
yeah, yeah.
So this, I think that was a big culture shift for me was okay, let's not jump right to the meeting. Let's not jump straight to this is what I need. let's take some time to connect as people, to see each other, to hear each other, ask about each other's families, and in that way, really build beautiful connections.
Yeah, that's one of the things that even I noticed when I moved from like Zimbabwe and Swaziland and then came to America, right? Because I think in America it's like job, person. For us,
Yeah.
it's person, job, right? So those are two distinct things where like for me, in general, even like when I talk to my parents when they went to the UK and just other people, like for us, when you see someone coming, like when you see somebody, even if like you don't know them, you say hello. Like if I'm getting into an elevator and a bunch of people, you say hi. You say there's a word we say like in Swaziland, it's Sanimonani, which means I see you all. Like it's just, oh, hello,
Oh
I
my
see you all,
goodness. I love that.
right? And then everyone, and then that's just how you greet, right? And that's it. It's
Yeah.
very simple. And even elders in Africa, for example, different African countries, if you just start a conversation without saying hi, they'll be like, "Oh, hi, hello, how are you?" And that's just how it goes. It was so funny because when I had been out here for some time and I went back home and I needed directions to go somewhere, I just came up to this group of people and I was like, "I'm trying to get to this place," and they all just looked at me, and I was like, "Okay, maybe they didn't really hear me." I was like, "I'm trying to go to this. Like, do you guys know what this? I'm trying to get a haircut in this," and they're like, "How are you today? Hi." And that was the moment I was like, "Oh my god, like what have I become?
What have I become?
What have I am I Americanized now? What's going on?" It was such a moment where like I was like, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that's not, because if you start that way, it's perceived as like rude, right? Or like you don't
Right.
value. You have to greet. You have to say hello. You have to say, "I see you all here." So it's just been interesting. Even like in DC, when I get on the metro, people are just on the phone, in a book. No one's really conversing. It's really weird to even start a
Yeah.
conversation with
Yeah.
somebody that you don't know, because they'll be like, "Oh, like that's a creep," or, "Oh, what do you want from me?" Or, "Oh, are you asking me for something?" It's never just taken as, I'm just saying hi, like,
Yeah.
"Hello, how are you? I'm sitting right next to you. Hey, how's your day going?" And that, so that thing, it can be difficult for a lot of people to kind of get over in different ways. Like, yeah, it's one of those things, yeah, as you're saying, that it's very cultural.
Yeah. I actually used to use a similar example, when I gave one of my trainings for the training program that I ran for USAID, the Respectful, Inclusive, and Safe Environments, about how I had a kind of a bias that when you pass someone on the sidewalk, in the hallway, you say hello to them. This is what we did in Atlanta. Like, you see your neighbor outside, you say hi. You see someone walking through the hallway, you say hi. And when I moved to Washington, D.C. At the start of the pandemic, and I would be out walking, and then especially a couple years later when everything opened up,
Yeah.
and I would be walking and I'd glance up at people to, make the eye contact that would initiate the hi. The
Yeah.
other person would never look up. And I had it in my heart that, oh, well, this must just be an unfriendly place. And that was like the bias that I had because of the cultural norms that I was used to. Like, oh, this must be an
Mm.
unfriendly place. Like, or that person must just be a bad person, a mean person. Like, these are the thoughts that would like rush through my head right away. And it took me a little time of being here to recognize that that's kind of just the culture. People are working really hard. This is a very work centric culture in the DC
Hmm.
area. So when they're on their phones, it is likely not that they're just, scrolling. It's likely that they're answering an email, that they're on the clock all the time. So it was definitely a shift in my own, like, oh, maybe I need to be more gracious in my thinking here.
It can be hard. It can be really hard because yeah, it can also be isolating, especially after COVID, right? Where it's like human connection, you craved it, and
Yeah,
then people are just scared to even connect with others, and
yeah.
it's just like, yeah, it's pretty wild. It's pretty like, yeah, it's one of those things. But anyways, moving back to you and your career journey, um, I see at some point you became like the director of education and like a chief editor, right? Which was in back in Atlanta. So how did you get to that level? Like now, that sounds like you were the boss, or you know that we're talking about. Is that what How did you get there?
That was part of my volunteer work that I was doing. It was an
Okay.
organization called Peace Building Solutions. And it's actually where my spouse and I met. We were both
Hmm.
volunteering for the same organization. I was focused on education and outreach. He was focused on really building up the organization. He's a civil engineer by trade.
Okay.
And we connected in that way. And it really gave me the opportunity to look at education from a different vantage point. No longer was I the one kind of bringing the information to individuals. I was helping the organization think through what people needed to learn about different conflicts, different humanitarian issues that might have been happening throughout the world, and how do we communicate that to people in a way that speaks to their minds, speaks to their hearts, and hopefully prompts some action from them. So it was a really interesting experience that I think gave me my first look at what I would have ultimately been doing later with USAID.
Okay, no, and that's a good segue. So, how did you? It sounds like you already kind of, when you were out in, like Liberia and all these other places, you're kind of like now getting to be more aware of USAID. Like
Yeah.
before that, did you know anything about them, or
No.
did you find out more? Okay, so
No.
what was your like entry? Like, how did you then finally say, okay, I'm going to get into this thing, and
Yeah.
because I think you started out as a curriculum developer, right, at USAID. So, yeah.
Yeah. This was a move that happened because of the pandemic. We were pulled out of Jordan, came back to the states, and the first thing I did was look for a job. Out of desperation, I took a position that was a junior level position as an instructional designer. It was with an organization that was supporting the Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance within USAID in their training unit. I took this job, and I remember at the time the manager asked me, "How will you feel coming into this position knowing that it's a junior level position and you are vastly overqualified for it?" And I said, "My mission is to support people. Like, this
Mm,
is all I've ever done. So I am here to be a team player. I am here to learn because I still have a lot to learn about instructional design in the way that it needs to be done for this organization. So I'm not coming in thinking I have all of the ideas. I'm coming
yeah.
in knowing that I have a lot to learn and I'm going to sit back and learn and be as helpful as possible." And I guess I said the right things because I got hired and joined the team. But because it was the pandemic, a lot of BHA's training that needed to happen had to be transitioned from all of the wonderful in person training that they were doing to prepare colleagues to go into humanitarian assistance situations, and to address conflict that was happening around the world. All of that had to be transitioned to virtual trainings. So a
Yeah.
lot of us all of a sudden had to learn a whole lot about e-learning.
Yeah.
So as a team, we just kind of, shifted our focus, learned these skills, practiced new things, supported each other, and it was a great learning process. But there wasn't much to do. in terms of actual training. So I had time on my hands. And elsewhere in USAID, there were other training initiatives going. And this is how I heard about respectful, inclusive, and safe environments as a learning platform. My team was tapped with transitioning some of those materials to virtual learnings. So I started
Mm.
on that as a instructional designer, and it all took off from there.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know a lot of people sometimes it's hard to like, oh, get to a certain level and then feel like I can't go back down or I can't, but I
yeah,
do feel like sometimes going back down, just taking one step back can propel you like 5 steps forward,
yeah,
so I mean it's so I don't think there's really ever anything wrong with it, and I feel like more people should be open to that as well, like that.
yeah,
Okay, want to get something going, especially like in this current climate today where like people are being furloughed, people are losing their jobs, and just in general, and that's in every industry, that's in a lot of industries where like now maybe
yeah,
you're starting from scratch and it might feel like, oh man, how can I how could I used to be here and now have to start here, and like does that mean I'm a failure? And it's like, no, you actually don't know, like you getting into that place,
mm-hmm,
starting where you're starting there
mm-hmm,
could actually lead you in a direction that you could have never imagined. So
for sure.
I was trying to put that out there, that it's not just because you're taking a step back doesn't mean you failed. It could also mean like a slingshot, you're just gaining momentum to propel yourself forward at even a
Yeah.
faster rate than you could have imagined, right? So
Yeah, I 100% agree. Especially if the person has the financial ability to do so, because I know
yeah.
that's a limiter, right?
Hmm.
A very real limiter for people. But if you have the financial ability to do so, and you can make yourself vulnerable in that way, there are huge gains, like you're talking about, especially with as fast as technology is changing, with
Yeah.
how much workplace paradigms have shifted. Learning more about those technologies from the vantage point of the person who actually has to do the work versus the manager telling the people to
Yeah.
do the work. That's what I gained when I took that step back. I learned so much about e-learning design, adult learning theory. I was very, very privileged to get a membership through this position to the Association for Talent Development, through whom I continue to learn like on a daily basis. I would have totally missed out on all of those opportunities had I not taken that step back, for the few years that it was. Because I will say, like, even though I took that step back, got that experience, it did, like you said, help me slingshot straight ahead. And within a span of a few years, I went from that junior level position to being the manager and coordinator of Rise. Couldn't have done that without that one position that got me started.
It's not awesome when that happens, when
Yeah,
when you start from somewhere and you find yourself with like, wow, look how far I've come. Because that's
yeah,
the other thing that's so difficult about life sometimes. You're always focused on looking ahead, but sometimes it's like you should look backward and see like where you've come from as well, and realize just how much you were able to achieve and do,
yeah,
and be proud of. Yeah, I know in America it's just really one of those things. It's like it's so hard to just look back and just take a moment
yeah.
and breathe. It can also feel like, man, I need to keep, but it's like, no, I mean, so that's really cool. That's really awesome that
Mm-hmm.
you have that story. I love that. That's a feel good story right
Thank you, Musa.
there. Yeah. Awesome. So now, you said you founded a new consulting practice. Can you speak more about that?
Yeah, thank you for asking about this. This was actually an idea I had before I was hired by BHA. Again, out of desperation, what am I going to do as a foreign service trailing spouse, as an educator? What is there for me? So I kicked around this idea. Maybe I'll start my own consulting firm. Well, I'm glad I waited because the
Mm.
experience I've gained in just the last 5 years has made me that much more marketable, that much more knowledgeable, that much more able to support, assist, and guide people. So when I was put on administrative leave and was told I would no longer be able to do the work I was doing for the agency through RISE, through the DEIA office, I thought, but I'm not finished.
Mm.
I'm not finished with this work.
Yeah.
I have the data to support how significant this is to people, how important this learning has been to people, how important it's been for the organization. And I wasn't ready to give that up. And tapping into that stubborn streak in me, I hinted at the beginning. I thought, well, you know what? I'm I'm gonna do it myself.
Yeah.
And it was kind of out of this loss, this grief I felt at losing this incredible training platform and all of the unique and inspiring and talented individuals like yourself, Mutsa, who were involved in bringing that learning to our colleagues at USAID. The loss of all of that was just devastating to me. And I spent some time with that grief. And out of that grief, I decided I'm going to create. I
Mm.
can't stand this loss. There needs to be room for this in the world. And
Mm.
I'm going to create that space. I could not have done that 5 years ago. I know that I have learned the resilience, the strategy, and what people need over these past 5 years, especially to be able to create something that will bring value to people who seek me out, for coaching
Yeah.
or training services, organizational development consultation. I needed to create that space and I needed to keep doing this work.
I really love that. That is so awesome. That you're able to take that grief and turn it into something positive, and now you're like focused on that. Because I mean, I had some of these similar conversations with Janina before, and how she was also dealing with her grief about everything that's happened, and turning that into back to music, back to the things that she loves, and back to the things that bring her joy, right?
Yeah,
And now, like, okay, let me lean into this a little more. And now what you're talking about as well, like this thing where, like, man, it can't end here.
no,
You're not gonna let that happen. So you're taking matters into your own hands, and you're saying, I'm going to push forward with this thing. I am going to do it, even if it's by myself, and I'm going to. And I think that's really admirable. And I definitely wish you all the best with this. Like, I know that it's gonna be successful. I know it's gonna help a lot of a lot of people one day.
thank
So
you. Thank you,
yeah, no,
Mutsa.
that's really awesome. Yeah. So, like, in this particular like conversation, then how do you have words of like encouragement that you would give to your colleagues who also are going through this grief period? Like, what are some things that you would say to, the people you used to work with and the people who are all affected by these kinds of things?
Ooh, you're getting me, Mutsa. You're getting me. First of all, I guess I would reiterate something that I've put out there on social media. I've shared with our colleagues that whatever they might be feeling at any given moment is completely valid.
Mm.
Whether it's grief or anger, frustration, despair, some folks feel relieved, some feel hopeful. All of that is valid. And it could depend on the day, could depend on the moment. Because folks have said, oh, I didn't realize I wasn't the only one feeling this way. There are so
Yeah.
many people, unfortunately, going through this. And all of us are going to have our moments. And there's so much back and forth with decisions and what's happening. It is a very emotionally turbulent time, and we have to acknowledge that this isn't just about what's happening to our jobs. It's also what's currently happening to us as individual people and
Yeah.
collectively as a workforce. So I think acknowledging the very visceral human aspect of what all of this means and the effects that it has had on us is a very important point to acknowledge. I would also say for folks to take heart that they have wonderfully transferable skills. And that has been the central aspect of the conversations I've had with clients and colleagues over the past couple of weeks is oftentimes them realizing that they have transferable skills that fit
Yeah.
into other sectors, other industries. I will say when I made the shift from being a public school teacher to an instructional design specialist and then as a training advisor, I had to learn an entire new vocabulary. And when I
Mm.
left teaching as a public school teacher, I thought to myself, well, all I'm going to be is a teacher. Like, I'll be a substitute teacher. I'll be a temporary teacher. All I'm going to be is a teacher because that's all I know how to do. But when I started reading more about adult learning theory and instructional design and training advisors, I realized I already do all of these things. I just called them
Yeah.
something different.
Yeah.
So I had to take time. There was a learning curve for me. And I feel like that's something else to point out is the patience aspect. I mentioned patience
Hmm.
earlier. Having the patience with ourselves to be learners again, to know I might have to learn an entirely different vocabulary
Yeah.
to be able to apply to these other positions I'm going after. I've been doing the things, I just haven't been calling them the same phrases. Have the patience with yourself and the process to do those things because it will yield wonderful results. Maybe not the exact ones you were hoping for, but as
Hmm.
we've talked about, Mutsa, there is opportunity in each experience.
There is always, I love that. That could even be the title of this episode. There's opportunity in each experience because I think it's so true. Like there have been moments where even some things that I've learned and I'm like, this is just something that I do in my spare time. And over time, that's something I became really good at. And then one day, like those skills were actually useful for something. And I was like, wow, I could
Ah,
actually apply for jobs using this skill, right? Or so I
amazing.
think what you're saying, yeah, is really, really insightful because even in conversations that I've had with Susan Levin, that's like the new episode that came, and then Dan, like these are career coaches. They were talking about the same thing about take the time. Especially Susan was talking about this that you have skills. If you're like a manager, director, or whatever you were, you have skills that can be transferred to a new industry. They just call it something different, as you just said. So it's just interesting to me how like these things are tying together. That you just have to take the time. And then Dan spoke about taking time and like approach the job search as a journalist, right? Like, okay, I want to get into this field or something. Talk
Yeah.
to some people around you to learn more about it. Not as a way to like, oh, I'm going to give you my CV, but to just really learn and then ask questions about, okay, this is what I know how to do. what does this look like in this industry?
Yeah.
And then that way you kind of get to learn the language, like you said, like, okay, this is what they call it in this field. This is what they call it in, but it's the same thing. So you're not starting from zero anymore. It's
Right.
just, you just learning how to rename it something else, but you already know how to do it.
Yeah.
So I think that was really a good way to tie all that together. So
Cool.
no, that a light bulb just went in my head. I was like, oh, I now I see it. Now it makes sense. Like it just tied everything together.
I
So
saw the creativity explosion happen, Mutsa.
yeah. That's why I was like, I really want to. That's one of the major reasons why I wanted to start this podcast, because you know it's unfortunate the things that are happening now, but people have such good stories to tell, such good insights to give, and it's such an important time to feel like you're not alone as well.
Yes.
And so that was one of the major reasons to say, if you listen to this person's story and it sounds just like yours, and you see what this person was feeling as well during this time, and this is what they're doing, and this is how you
Yeah.
can you hopefully makes you feel less alone, and can also encourage you to say, okay, let's figure this out.
Yeah.
That was one of the major one of the major pushes I had to say, okay, I really want to do this, and I hope that people gain from it.
Yeah. How beautiful, Mutsa. And I will say that that is something that has encouraged me over the past few months since I've been on administrative leave, is just how generous people have been with their time and their willingness to either just listen or offer advice or even offer a connection.
Hmm.
So I guess that's something I would want folks to hear too. Is I know COVID put us out of the habit of reaching to people, spending time with people, just spending time
Yeah.
with people. Um, but I've been doing more of that lately. Certainly since my calendar has has been a lot more flexible. But really being intentional about building connections and building relationships, and just blown away at the generosity of people around me. So I encourage others to do that as well, especially the introverts. That's
Yeah.
that's what makes it hard for me. Is I'm like, oh no, I don't want to bother anyone, or I'm not important enough for them to care about my questions. It hasn't been true in any single one of the cases. I've reached out to folks and they have been so generous and so kind and so supportive.
Hmm. That's you know what? That's if anyone's gonna take anything from this podcast, it's that. It's that like that's really important to really highlight. And yeah, let's lean on each other.
Yeah,
There's never been an important time. There's never been a better time to lean on people than it is right now, because how often is it that I mean, we saw this with COVID. How often is it that we have something collectively happen to a big group of people,
great.
and we're all dealing with similar things, and we just have to lean on each other, right?
Yeah,
To the bad thing with COVID was we couldn't even lean on each other because we're all isolated. We all had to stay indoors. This is a little better than COVID, because we can actually reach out and meet, and
yeah,
it could even just be like, let's go get a coffee and just chat, and just it's simple things like that. So I think that's a really important place
yeah.
to finish the podcast and end the podcast. But you know what I will say is, listening to your journey, Bobbie, I'm inspired. I don't know, I feel, I don't know. I it's really admirable. Like I didn't know all this about you, and I feel like your story is just, it's really beautiful. Just the way it's kind of begun, and all these experiences that you had. Um I've really enjoyed listening to your experiences, to be honest. Like yeah, I'm so I just have to say, like, your journey is beautiful. Like your journey, just
Thank
from
you.
where you started to where you are now, it's, yeah, you've, and I love that you've been open to learning, and open to like whatever life gives you, and just making something out of that. I
Yeah,
think it's such a valuable trait to have. And so, yeah, no, I just had to say that your
Thanks.
story was, yeah, it was really impactful for me to hear.
Thank you, Mutsa. That's very kind of you to say. Well, give me a call. We'll get some coffee. I'll tell you some more stories.
Yeah, no, I love that. 100%. Well, listener, thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
It's my
We
pleasure.
appreciate you taking the time. Yeah, and yeah, just for people out there, thank you again. Do subscribe, do like, do share your comments. Like, if this also resonated with you, please do let me know. I would love to hear, what you feel and what you're saying. More exciting episodes to come. Look out for those. But any last words, Bobby, before we close out?
Be kind to yourself and be kind to each other.
Awesome. That's exactly. Yeah. And with that, thank you so much, everyone. And we'll catch you on the next one.